No, it's not a yes or no. I'll give you the answer.
Sure it is.
My answer to all of those families would be, if you had listened to people like me, people like Ron Paul, people like Pat Buchanan, our troops never would have been in Lebanon or in Iraq to begin with, and your loved ones would still be with you.
In this video, libertarian podcaster Dave Smith goes head-to-head with neocon, MAGA commentator Ben Ferguson over the realities of war, blowback, and the devastating consequences of American interventionism. Let's watch this together.
Really interesting debate, I think, and it all stemmed from something that Dave Smith on this show said about the United States being, well, let's listen to it.
The IDF is the worst terrorist organization in the region. Let's get real. The United States of America is arguably the worst terrorist organization in the world. If you want to look over the last 25 years, how many innocent civilians we've slaughtered. You're getting us into the neocon. Yeah, that's right. You're getting us into the neocon seventh war, which they've been dying for the last 25 years.
Now, as a consequence of that, all hell broke loose, obviously, online. And Ben Shapiro said about Dave, I'm sorry, but you hate the country if you say America is the worst terrorist organization in the world. You just do. And Dave has since responded to that on this show. But Ben, let's just get you to, because Dave's already explained what he meant about this. And many people agree with it, right? And, you know, just to prep you up for this, you're about to defend the charge that America is not the world's worst terrorist organization within hours of Donald Trump posting to the world that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. But in the context of the words coming from the President of the United States, quite hard to argue that that is in itself, those words are not the words you would normally associate with the leader of a terrorist organization.
Yeah, look, I think two things about what the president said there. He's clearly talking to the leadership in Iran, and he's saying that you are going to destroy your people by not opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not screwing around. This goes back to FAFO. The president of the United States of America is using the same foreign policy that Hillary Clinton used, that Bill Clinton used, that Jimmy Carter used, and that Barack Obama used.
When did any of them threaten, Ben? When did any of them threaten?
Let me finish the point I'm going to make there real quick, because it's important. Right. This president, the only difference between his foreign policy with Iran and the other Democrats I mentioned was they all said that they couldn't get a nuclear weapon. And Donald Trump said, I am actually agreeing with you and I'm going to do it. I'm going to stop them. And you cannot be a terrorist to the world while Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, shut down shipping lanes you have no right to shut down, and expect that there be no consequences. The president doesn't bluff. And so when he puts that out, I think he's had about enough of this. I think he's had about enough of the fact that Iran, even after we go and kill their first level, their second level, their third level, and their fourth level of people, they're still not giving in. He's like, okay, you guys want to play this game, FAFO, and I'm going to act, which is exactly, by the way, why I voted for him.
But just before I go back to Dave to respond to that, explain to me the difference between the belief that Donald Trump has about Iran, that they want death to America, death to all Americans. That's why they want a nuclear weapon. And if they get one, they will kill millions of Americans, which is why America has to stop them. And the President of the United States saying he wants to wipe out an entire civilization in one night, which can only be done with nuclear weapons or weapons of that power. Look, as I say, look, I don't think he's going to do that. But he has said he's going to do that. Many people think he's already committed a war crime in signaling his intention to do that. But that's for another day. But my point is, what is the difference in terms of language between the head of Al-Qaeda, say bin Laden, saying wanting to wipe out millions of Americans, or Iran wanting to do that, and America wanting to do that? I mean, that would be Dave's point, I'm sure, in a moment. But before we go to him, what is the difference?
Well, look, I think the president here is a guy that always pushes the limit on what he's saying, especially when he's dealing with bad guys, whether it was in Venezuela, whether it's narco terrorists, or whether it's the Ayatollah and those that are in charge right now in Iran. Do I think he's going to indiscriminately kill a bunch of people? Of course not. Do I think that's the intent of the tweet? Of course not. If you've talked to the president and you know what he says here, you can either just try to hit him on that and score political points, or you can look at what the president has done so far. He has been incredibly surgical with the strikes that he's had. He's not been going after and just bombing. I'll go to an example that I think Dave used on this show, saying Israel's just bombing all these buildings in Gaza, for example. That's not what the president's done here at all. The president has been very surgical in using our military. I have no doubt that that's what he's going to do here. And what he's saying is, if I go after your electrical grid, you literally are going back to the Stone Ages when there was no electricity. So if you want to hit the president political points to win a political argument, fine, do that. But what the president's saying in that tweet, I think, is directly to the leadership in Iran and telling them, I'm not screwing around. This is going to be very bad for you. Open up the Strait of Hormuz and do it immediately. We can have a ceasefire. You guys have been talking to us for a while now. You know how to do stall and delay tactics. This is a deadline. This is a red line. By the way, other presidents have given red lines before. They just don't back them up. This president does. Barack Obama didn't back up his red line multiple times on foreign policy issues, including when chemical weapons were used.
Well, that is true. Yeah, that is true. But Dave Smith, let me come to you. I mean, my big problem with this is, like I say, this will be airing after that deadline has passed. And my guess is the Iranians will not concede in the way that Trump wants them to before this deadline. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they will, but I don't think they will. And therefore, they call his bluff to a degree, and Trump will not then go through with what he vowed to do, which is wipe out the entire Iranian population. And then he becomes, the emperor with no clothes to a degree, the boy who cried wolf. It's like there's a danger in that as well, in the president of the world's greatest military not doing what he says he would do if X, Y, Z doesn't happen.
Well, okay, so let me say, first of all, there's just this obvious contradiction in what Ben just said there, which is that on one hand, he's saying the president doesn't bluff. He draws a red line and he sticks to it. And then on the other hand, saying, that's just Donald Trump. He talks crazy like this. And you're just trying to win a cheap political argument if you look at what he's literally saying. It can't be both of those things now, can it? If he doesn't bluff, then Donald Trump has promised to send them back to the Stone Age, that it will be the end of the civilization, never to be recovered, and that presumably starting tonight is bridge and power plant days. Okay, yes. So if he doesn't, right. So remember the non-interrupting rule. So if he's either bluffing or he's not bluffing here. Now, obviously, it does bode well for this particular political argument that sparked off on your show a few weeks ago, that now Donald Trump is making these threats. But the position Ben's in here, it's almost like being the White House press secretary. If we were talking last week and I had said, Donald Trump's going to say this, you would have been like, no, he's not. No one's saying that. This is ridiculous. But now he's said it. So now you have to defend how he doesn't bluff, but also he doesn't really mean what he said. Look, Piers, I don't know. I hope you're right. But all the indications here are that tonight's 8 p.m. deadline is going to come and go without the Iranians capitulating. And so Donald Trump has really put all his chips in on the center of the table here. So to the dynamic you just laid out, he's now painted himself into this corner for absolutely no reason. He's painted himself into this corner where he's either got to do something huge or, as you said, be exposed as just being a complete bluffer,
not
having
having
a real deadline.
Here's the difference,
hang on, Ben. But my guess is he'll.
As Smith rightly points out, you cannot simultaneously claim a leader never bluffs while defending their threat to wipe out an entire civilization as mere rhetoric. But as the debate shifts from the president's Twitter account to the realities on the ground, Ferguson attempts to reframe the destruction of civilian infrastructure as a necessary evil to stop a nuclear threat.
Off the table, that's my definition of victory, no doubt about it.
Dave Smith, your response.
Well, I mean, again, just as is almost always the case with war propaganda, it's just the contradictions are just everywhere around you. It's like my secondary. I was about to. My secondary goal is regime change, but there's already been regime change in this war, but it's not a war. But we've always been at war for 47 years.
Always said it's a war.
Piers, Okay, buddy. Yeah. Okay. Well, you say it's a war. The administration won't admit that because it's totally illegal if it is. Even Donald Trump himself said we can't call it a war for legal reasons. But yes, of course, it is a war. But I mean, Piers, if you just think about how many people, and I got to say, particularly, I'm stunned by the Iranian expat types, which I've debated a couple on your show before, because I always am a little bit more forgiving to them when they say something like, you know, it's just how brutally repressive the mullah and the ayatollah's regime is and how they want to liberate the people. But not one of them have jumped off board since Donald Trump has essentially announced total war against the civilian population. And here again, Ben repeats, send them back to the Stone Age. I'm sorry, did women have liberation in the Stone Age? Is that when everyone gets to take their burqas off?
I said that earlier. But Dave, I don't mind the debate, but I said it earlier.
Does that lead
that
to?
Means not
right, I know, but and that leads
electricity.
Right.
That has nothing to do with women's rights.
Yeah, but Ben, sorry, hang on.
I'm sorry. We said we're not going to interrupt.
Let me just say on that point, Ben.
Well, that's war against the civilian population.
Well, Dave, what Ben is doing. Sorry, hang on.
I'm sorry. We said we're not going to interrupt.
Let me just say on that point, Ben.
Well, that's war against the civilian population.
Well, Dave, what Ben is doing is what I've noticed a lot of people on the right have been doing, who are still very pro-Trump in this war, is you're translating what Trump apparently meant when he said, we're going to bomb you back to the Stone Ages. You have decided it means no electricity because it's the only way you can really justify it, right?
Piers,
and
which
so,
I've been talking Donald Trump
and I would say, Ben, I would say this. When you said victory, that's why it's interesting to get you to clarify what victory is. When you said it, you know, it's stopping the Iranians from developing a nuclear weapon, a dirty bomb. But that's what we were told had been achieved last summer. At the end of the 12-day war, Trump literally said that. We have stopped them developing a nuclear weapon. Mission accomplished. Here we are, less than a year later, 9 months later, and we're being told that victory will be if the United States and Israel stop the Iranians developing a nuclear weapon. But what's happened in 9 months?
Piers, great question. You have 60% enriched uranium that we know about that they still have. That's part of what we want to get out of the country. That is just taking data and looking at it and then saying, is this still a threat? How quickly can you get 60% to where it's military grade, to where you can get a dirty bomb? It's really damn close. So the president made another calculus here and said, okay, we hit those two facilities. They didn't stop what they were doing. They still have it way too close to military grade where they can do a dirty bomb. We know their intent is to kill innocent people and get a dirty bomb. They've said it over and over again. So therefore, because of that information, we are going to go in yet again, and we're going to make sure that America is safe and the rest of the world is safe.
All right, so Ben, do you accept that if the Americans and Israelis do not get the enriched uranium out of Iran, this is not victory, it is a failure, the war will have been lost?
I think there's two ways you can look at that. And again, this is coming from a military mindset. Number one is I talk to people in the military, they say, look, if they can't access it, right? If we bomb it in and we push it in and they can't access it anymore, that could be considered a victory from a military standpoint perspective. And again, this is way above my pay grade. That's why I ask other people questions that are experts. Would we love to get it out? Yes. But if we can't get it out and they can't get it out, that can be a victory. It depends on where it is. It depends on how much we bombed it. It depends on how secure it is if it stays in the ground there. So I don't say it's only one or the other, success or failure. It depends on the information on the ground. And if it is in a place where they're like, no one's going to be able to get to this, we can't get to it, neither can they, it's now unusable, that's a success as well. But I'd love to get it out of there. Yes, I don't like Iranians having anything close to it or having it in their backyard.
The problem is,
if you put it in the ground, it's done, it's done.
Let me come back to Dave. I mean, the problem is, I've got increasingly limited confidence in the statements about the state of Iran's uranium and ability to build a bomb because of what happened last summer. I believed what I was told, that after the 12-day war, that was it. The threat had been neutralized. They couldn't build a nuclear weapon. That was it. And here we are in March. This was last summer. And in March, now we're being told they've got all this enriched uranium. None of it got removed last time. It's still there. And how are we going to know whether we've removed it from their ability to use it or not? We're not going to know. So, unfortunately, that to me doesn't look like a very substantive victory claim to me. It's just going to muddy the waters again.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and look, the fact that the goalposts just get moved so much, and like you said, Piers, not that long ago, just last summer, where all the people who supported the 12-day war were boasting and demonizing anybody who opposed it as what a success this was because we obliterated their nuclear program. But like, if we have to go back and fight a whole new war right now over that nuclear threat, then that was wrong. Then you got to admit you were wrong about it back then.
From Trump.
And if not, but
here is the quote from Trump, Dave. This is last year, after the 12-day war. I don't think they'll ever do it again. They've had it. It was a complete obliteration. They were set back decades. Turned out decades was actually 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. This is just too ridiculous to stand. And if I could just go back.
The goalposts never stop moving. Just months prior, the pro-war establishment claimed Iran's nuclear capabilities were completely obliterated. Now that same threat is being used to justify a new war. Realizing he's losing the tactical argument, Ferguson pivots to a classic neoconservative talking point, accusing anti-war advocates of burying their heads in the sand, claiming American isolationism is what caused 9/11s.
And you haven't answered that question yet because you don't know how to answer it. Your foreign policy is fraud, Dave. Your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand, bother no one, and then no one bothers you. And when you're dealing with terrorists, that never works. 9/11 is a great example of that, by the way. We were literally burying our head in the sand, acting like Osama bin Laden was not a threat after he kept saying he wanted to take out America. He wanted to go after America. And every president did the same thing. They buried their hand in the sand, and they said, we're not going to deal with him right now. We'll leave him alone. We won't get wars in the Middle East.
Let me ask you this,
so
Ben.
ridiculous and ahistorical.
Ben, what's interesting?
America was just not intervening. No, it's not actually. We were not interventionist until 9/11. Yeah, right, please. We were bombing Iraq. We had a sanctions regime around Iraq. We had military bases in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, every one of the things that the terrorists objected to
what were we doing in
interventions.
The Middle East? Nothing.
No.
We were doing nothing when 9/11 happened in the Middle East.
The UN,
we were not.
You don't know what you're talking about. The UN
were we invading a country in Iran on 9/11? No.
Can I finish the sentence,
or
are you just going to interrupt?
During 9/11?
Okay.
The answer is no. We were asleep at the wheel on 9/11. There's a reason why John Ashcroft wrote a book called Never Again, because we were so asleep at the wheel that we realized afterwards we can never allow it to happen again.
When Madeleine Albright was asked about how the UN had estimated that 500,000 children had died of starvation and malnutrition due to the Clinton blockade around Iraq, she said, and I quote, "That price is worth it." These were the non-interventionist years of peace and prosperity.
What? 92, 93, 94? We're talking about 2001. That's a long ways off, bro. I said, what were we doing when 9/11 happened in the Middle East? In the Middle East on 9/11.
Try 1998.
Almost 2 decades earlier.
No, I'm talking about 3 years earlier. You don't know what you're talking about.
And you said that Madeleine Albright said that in the early 90s. You just said 90s on the show.
I didn't
2001
say, I said in the 90s.
Is when 9/11 happened. Am I wrong?
1998 is when she made the comment. It was all through the Clinton years. Bill Clinton stopped being president in the year 2000, 1 year before 9/11. Sorry, this is just math,
So you're saying
Ben.
that the blockade of food is what caused 9/11 now?
No, I'm not saying it.
Food is what caused 9/11 now.
No, I'm not saying it. Osama bin Laden himself listed it as one of his stated grievances, along with the military bases.
One of a list that was like the Unabomber's list.
Yes, that also involved the U.S. military bases on Holy Land in Saudi Arabia, and U.S. support for brutal regimes that oppress Muslims in the region, and U.S. support for the Israelis, who have been occupying, at that time, for 30 plus years, the Palestinian territory. Yes, this is basic history. You can say I'm a fraud, but you don't know any of this.
Hold on.
You don't know any of this.
So I'm correct in saying that your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand and hope that no one bothers you based on what you just said. Because you're saying anytime we stand up for us in the world, that immediately it's going to be our fault when we get attacked. That is your foreign policy.
Instead of you saying it, why don't I just say what I actually believe? What I believe is that we don't launch wars of aggression, wars of choice, reckless wars against countries that don't pose a threat to us. I'm defending the just war theory of Christianity and the constitutional system that the framers laid out. If we do have to go to war, there should be a vote in Congress.
Okay, so then here's my question. To every American
faced with undeniable historical facts about the Clinton-era blockades and the actual stated motives for 9/11s, Ferguson is out of arguments. So, he resorts to the ultimate emotional trap. He weaponizes the grief of Gold Star families, demanding to know what Smith would say to the relatives of U.S. troops killed overseas.
Did you just say,
they killed more American soldiers
I'm sorry,
than
Ben.
any other regime in the world?
Ben, I'm sorry. I know I'm a fraud and I don't know a lot about foreign policy. Did you just say that ISIS is an Iranian proxy?
I said that they knew that ISIS was given safe passage to cross through at some points in the past. Yes, that's a fact.
They're a proxy of the Iranians.
I said proxies and including
yes, they get along
like
so well.
I'm going to go back to asking the simple question I asked you a second ago.
They're a proxy.
If you are American and your loved one was killed at the hands of the Iranian regime and their terrorist proxies, you're telling me, and you want to look at those families in the face and say, Iran is not a threat to the United States of America or our soldiers, even though their loved one died at the hands of the Iranian regime.
Okay, all I ask is that you allow me to answer that question since you've asked it now. Is that cool?
It's a yes or no, but go.
No, it's not a yes or no. I'll give you the answer.
Sure it is.
My answer to all of those families would be, if you had listened to people like me, people like Ron Paul, people like Pat Buchanan, our troops never would have been in Lebanon or in Iraq to begin with, and your loved ones would still be with you. But instead, you listened to the foreign policy of people like you, Ben, and that's why we were involved in those conflicts to begin with. Iran poses no threat to the United States of America, meaning the middle part of North America. Does Iran pose a threat to our ability to occupy Iraq? Well, actually, we were kind of on the side of the most Iran-linked militia groups at the time. But yeah, there was some fighting with some Shiites in there, too. It was another disastrous war that Piers Morgan was correct to oppose. And none of those boys would have been killed if they had listened to people like Piers.
So, Piers, let's be clear. Dave Smith's foreign policy is the only...
That right there is why the old neoconservative playbook is finally failing. For decades, the pro-war establishment relied on emotional manipulation and accusations of hating America to silence anyone who questioned regime change. But as Dave Smith brilliantly demonstrated, you can't use the tragic deaths of American soldiers to justify endless wars when your catastrophic foreign policy is exactly what put those soldiers in harm's way to begin with. It's a brutal reality check that exposes the military-industrial complex for what it is. If you want to see more debates that cut through the establishment spin, make sure to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and let us know in the comments who you think won this clash.